It is a news-filled day in Indianapolis on this getting set for the week of, as we've talked about, the kickoff of college football and then the National Football League as well. Colts getting set for the Miami Dolphins. We now know the Colts have named their captains. These are captains that were voted on, of course, by the team. There is other news that we're going to get to involving the Colts from a national standpoint. But before we do that, Eddie, I don't know, have you seen the list? I have it before me here of the voted on captains for the Indianapolis Colts for the 2025 and then 26 season, turning into 26, I mean. Would you like to guess? Have you seen the list?
No, I have not.
Okay. I'm going to tell you the side of the football, and then you're going to guess the player. I will give you, please get for me prepared, the ding or buzz sound, and we will determine that way whether you are correct or incorrect in your guess. The first is a defensive player.
I will go DeForest Buckner.
I'm giving you the cue to you to ding yourself. There we go. Okay. Next, another defensive player.
Zaire Franklin.
Next, a third defensive player.
I'll go off the beaten path here. Instead of Kenny Moore, I'll go with Cam Bynum. Kenny Moore.
Now we have two offensive players. Of the 5 voted on captains for the Colts, there are 2 that are on the offensive side of the ball.
2 on the offensive side of the ball.
That is correct.
Quentin Nelson. Michael Pittman Jr.
Eddie's thinking. Forgets that
Jonathan
the show's
Taylor?
over at 3.
Yeah, I don't know who the other offensive player would be.
Daniel Jones.
Oh, really?
Daniel Jones, and I think that goes to just speak to the fact that the players in the National Football League are well aware of the fact that the quarterback is going to be your captain, obviously. I think, and that's not to say that he doesn't merit being a captain and but I think the fact simply that he is new to the roster, but nonetheless voted a quarterback, Daniel Jones. Here is the big story of the day. We have, and I have mentioned this before. I mentioned it yesterday. I mentioned it numerous times. Our job is a great job, what we do for a living. I am well aware of the fact and appreciative of the fact and at times incredulous of the fact that we have the job that we have. People say to me all the time, man, I would love your job. You just get to talk sports all the time, which is true. No question. And we are incredibly fortunate to do that. And it is a pretty easy job. It is. I see people performing tasks on the regular that I think to myself, either I could not mentally do that, I could not physically do that, I certainly could not intellectually do that on a number of areas and a number of professions. The vast majority of them, as a matter of fact. And there are very few times where our job is difficult. But today's one of them. Not because there is tragic news to report, not because we lost, a coworker. I mean, you get those things, right? But today is a challenging day in conversation because of the sensitivity of the subject matter. The Washington Post had an article that came out earlier today that you probably heard even if you were to go and listen to the radio program just before we're on. From a national perspective, when this report came out from the Washington Post about Jim Irsay, it immediately resonated and they were discussing it. It is a nationally relevant story. And I'll get to why in a second. But the Washington Post had a story that came out today regarding Jim Irsay, the late owner of the Colts, who died in May at the age of 65. And in that article, the Washington Post said, and I'm going to quote directly, that Irsay, quote, spent the last 2 years of his life in the throes of a relapse that he and Colts executives repeatedly hid from the public, end quote. It goes on then to cite different sources and, different people regarding Jim Irsay's health late in his life and the level in which opiates apparently had gripped him, including the use of ketamine, I hope I'm saying that correctly, and prescribed in a prescribed aspect to the amount that people close to him were worried about him. He consumed using opiate pills, according to sources, and numerous people said that they saw him taking injections that had been prescribed from, obviously, an opiate that is extremely delicate and dangerous. The Post said that it found evidence that Jim Irsay suffered 3 overdoses in the final 5 years of his life, once in Turks and Caicos in 2020, once at his Carmel home in December of 2023. That is the one that I believe there was a 911 call that was made public in terms of the way that he was found, and then 12 days later at a Florida resort. The Florida resort, and I cannot recall whether or not I mentioned this on the radio, but the one in Florida is the one that many of us from a local standpoint in the media were tipped to, if you will, and that we were told that Jim Irsay had suffered a medical situation in Florida and eventually had been air ambulanced, I'm using that in air quotes, to Indianapolis, where he was under care in Indianapolis. And the article in the Washington Post does say that he was hospitalized in Indianapolis. I say all of that, and I mention the fact that our job at times can be difficult for this fact. I spent the majority of my time this morning when I read this article and heard about it trying to balance the responsibility of A, the discussion of it, B, the decipher of it, and C, quite frankly, the relevance of it. Because Jim Irsay is no longer with us. And I kept going back to two things in my mind. I kept balancing back and forth in my mind the two manners in which I felt this should be deciphered or discussed. The first is this. If you've seen the television show Ted Lasso, which is a fabulous show, and I'm not going to give any sort of a spoiler alert on this, but I'm going to discuss a particular scene that takes place. There is a portion of the show Ted Lasso where one of the players has an altercation that gets him ejected from a match. It's a soccer team. And one of the coaches for the team is in a press conference afterwards and is asked if the organization or the franchise that the player plays for condones what it is that the player had done. And the coach thinks for a second. And in a brilliant moment of relatable epiphany, even though it's fictional, he discusses the fact that when he was a player, he had an incident where he was involved in something that crossed over from a personal matter into one that affected and impacted his team because he was not available to play and etc. And it all stems from an incident where he says, what I learned was that, yes, while I was a public figure, the person that I got involved with, there was a personal matter. I was a public figure on a public sports team, but there was a personal matter of which I was completely unaware. And that personal matter is one that none of us know what's going on in each other's lives. And for that aspect, even though people feel like because they buy a ticket to a sporting event that means that they have the right to say abusive things to players or coaches or whatever, or to go personal on them, the reality is we don't know what's going on in their personal lives that may bleed into their work, and therefore we don't know how exactly they can be impacted within the spirit of competition by something that is really a personal matter that's none of our particular business. And there was a large part of me that thought not only should Jim Irsay be able to his soul rest peacefully without us deciphering the demons that gripped him in the later part of his life, but in addition to that, what was taking place in his personal life is personal. And I don't know, even though we were, and I was, along with, and I won't say the names of others, but there were two notably other people within the media that I had said, hey, here's what I heard about what happened in the state of Florida, and we were trying to concretely find out if that was factual. Not to be Woodward and Bernstein and break the news to the world, but to give foundation and understanding of where things were on a personal level with the football team. And as this report came out about the Washington Post, I really did go back and forth in my mind as to whether or not it was relevant publicly. And the reality is, while Jim Irsay was, I think, a very good individual, a philanthropic individual, a pillar of this community, he also was one, by his own admission, that was a flawed individual. And to his credit, those things under which he was flawed, he was public about in his later life, and I think utilized that to allow other people to see that even the wealthiest of the wealthy, even the upper 1% of society based on society's definition of it, can come under the grip of something that knows no boundary, no socioeconomic wall, etc. And so therefore his addiction was public partially because he chose for it to be. Now, the level of that addiction, maybe we didn't know in totality from a public standpoint. But the main reason why I think this, and this is where it's uncomfortable, and this is where it's slippery, and this is where it's tricky, and this is where I certainly hope that in forms of responsibly speaking on it, I'm doing so. But I think the reason why this story from the Washington Post is in fact relevant, and I totally understand and respect if people are like, look, this is not something that needs to be discussed publicly. I get that, except for this. This is a franchise that plays in, at the time of its building, the most publicly subsidized sports venue in the United States in its history. This is a franchise that has a partnership and an agreement with the city of Indianapolis that a large percentage of all revenue that comes to that building, non-football related, Board of Indianapolis, a percentage of the revenue having nothing to do with the Indianapolis Colts, a Taylor Swift concert, a rent out by a company that wants to put on an automobile festival, a band competition. All of those things, a percentage of that revenue, as in agreement with the Capital Improvement Board of Indianapolis, goes back to the Indianapolis Colts, and during the time of his life goes back to Jim Irsay. Meaning that if Jim Irsay is an individual whose wealth is greatly publicly subsidized, then it is within the best interest of the public to understand and be aware that its money is going towards something that it feels is being done in a responsible fashion to give return on investment to the best available way to the city of Indianapolis. And by that, I mean by building a football team that is winning, that people are proud of, that the reason you have a stadium built is because you were worried about losing the football franchise and missing out on the opportunity to go down and celebrate Super Bowls or playoff wins or whatever it may be. And so the city came together. When I say the city, I mean the taxpayers of this town came together with a sweetheart deal for Jim Irsay to make sure that his franchise could not move and could not leave. And so, therefore, retroactively, people then, and I think people still now, wanted confirmation or assurance that everything was being handled in the best available way. That's the area where it does become of public interest. And in addition to that, Jim Irsay is somebody who a lot of that revenue, and yes, he shared it with the public, but a lot of that revenue then went into Jim Irsay's hobbies and interests. And by that, I mean the collections, the guitars, the drum sets. Those things were things that are his personal business and his personal interests, and absolutely he has every right to build all of that, but he chose to make it public. He chose to display it to the public. He chose to get on the stage and play his guitar and do other such things, meaning he continued to put himself in a public light in intermixing it and marrying it with his personal interests. And so therefore, when news comes out about his personal life, it is in fact public. And that is not to say that we can go back and change things. That is not to say, unfortunately, we can go back and get him healthy and extend his life. I think we simply look at the news story from the Washington Post and we handle it and we digest it and we interpret it in one of two different ways. On the left hand, you look at it and say, this is an example of the dangers of addiction and the fact that there is no shame in falling under the grip of addiction, because look at people who had even the highest and the greatest of resources to combat it, and yet they fell victim to it. And I'm talking about Jim Irsay. And maybe Jim Irsay's legacy now, even beyond his time actively being with us, is that reminder to people that when people feel like it is a weakness of theirs that they have fallen grip to addiction, that they can look at somebody like Jim Irsay and say, even somebody with the greatest of resources struggled with this. So I should not find shame in my struggle, but to continue to try to move forward and overcome it. There is that aspect of it. And then there is the other aspect of it, which is there should be a transparency about the way that the football team is being run because of the public subsidy and financial investment within it. And this story from the Washington Post, assuming that it is all factual, I'm not saying that the Colts stood up on a mountaintop and denied things, but one could make the argument that they were not totally transparent. And from a personal standpoint, that is well within their right. And for the daughters of Jim Irsay, that is well within their right. And for Pete Ward, who I have all the respect in the world for, that is well within his right. Or Steve Campbell and the Indianapolis Colts and the way that they navigated through this story. But it also then sets precedent that moving forward, when there are situations involving the boardroom, the ownership, or the way things are going for the Indianapolis Colts, the precedent is such that you could look back on it and say, but they weren't totally transparent before, so how do we know that they are now? I'm not saying that makes them wrong. I'm not saying that makes them bad people. I'm saying that's part of the intricacies and the dichotomy of how we ingest and interpret this story. Additionally, when people say, which I totally understand, why is it that the national people are always the one that ends up getting the story? A lot of that is because national people can cross over or break through barriers in terms of access that from a local standpoint, when you have to pick your battles on what it is that you continue to pursue versus continue to cover. That's just a reality in the human nature of all of it. But I think the biggest part of the story is simply this, and that is Jim Irsay was by all account, a very kind-hearted, passionate football fan and football man who operated and owned a franchise that he loved dearly in a city that he fell in love with and wanted to make an impact on dearly beyond even his time here. And while his passing is certainly premature because it was 65 and not that there's an age that it's appropriate to pass, but you get what I'm saying. Perhaps his legacy for this city is the fact of the reminder of the grips of that demon. And therefore, I think Jim Irsay, if he were here to speak about it, would say that for this story, perhaps the imprint that it should leave on this community is that if you are hearing my voice right now and you are somebody who has suffered addiction, whether it be in gambling, whether it be in alcohol, whether it be in narcotics, whether it be in any form of things, then know that you are not alone and know that it is an ongoing battle that is a day-to-day battle. It is one game at a time. It is one day at a time. I am very blessed and very fortunate that I have personally not suffered those things. It's not to say that I don't know people that have. And perhaps that should be Jim Irsay's legacy, is this reminder of the fact that no matter how high your status, and I use the term high probably as a bad word there, but no matter how elevated your status, it grips everyone. But there is that battle of why is it relevant? For the reasons that I spelled out. But his football team that now is in the ownership umbrella of his daughters, and we shall see what happens with that, because you also get into the nuances of, when you look at the inheritance taxes and the moving forward, what happens with the ownership. I know that there have been articles done on that. I think that is still a fluid situation, and another one where perhaps a year from now we learn more about this transition than we've been told now. That's well within their right. But the football team itself is getting set to get underway here for another year in Indianapolis as the Indianapolis Colts, and Daniel Jones is the quarterback. We've talked exhaustively about Anthony Richardson. We've talked exhaustively about that quarterback battle. And yesterday, Chris Ballard's press conference, which we went over, there are multiple, most people seem to disagree with me. I thought Chris Ballard, more edgy than normal. He's always edgy. But I thought yesterday he was more than normal, and my personal thought is that is of relevance because there is question about, at the very top, where do things go from here? Because Chris Ballard is somebody that clearly Jim Irsay thought very highly of and very much trusted, but Jim Irsay is not here. How does that change things? Does that change Ballard's approach? Does it change his comfort level? Does it change his confidence? Does it change his authority? I don't know the answer to any of that, and so therefore you read tea leaves. And in reading tea leaves, it is my opinion that yesterday he was a little more defensive and a little more on edge than he normally is, and he usually is anyway. I don't think he's a bad guy. I think at times he gets a little edgy in press conferences, and I thought yesterday was one of them. I may well be wrong. I wasn't in the room. I was listening to it right here, as all of you were, but we talked about that. And at some point, we've got to talk about just the roster in general, and in addition to that, what they can do this year. Is Daniel Jones going to be a game manager that allows them to win a lot of games? I think that's entirely possible. How many games? That remains to be seen. But there are things about this roster that I think you like. I think you've got to like the fact that they've got a good receiving room. I think you got to like the fact that while we don't know the totality of the cornerbacks and the safeties and the defensive backs, I like the names that are there and the experience that's there at positions. But how does that work now in Lou and Uremovic's defense? That's another thing that we will look forward to as they get set to take on the Dolphins. And then you have college football getting underway. And lined up on the program today, we've got conversation about a lot of it. Tom Noie is going to talk Notre Dame with us coming up at 1 o'clock today. The Irish, many believe, as do I, that they're going to be right back there in that college football push. And I've told you with Marcus Freeman. The thing about Marcus Freeman that I dislike the most is the fact that he's really likable, and I don't like Notre Dame. And he makes me kind of root for him. Last year when Indiana and Notre Dame played on December 20th in the college football playoff, I loved everything about it. And I wanted Indiana to win that game, but when Notre Dame won it, I was like, you know what? I like these guys. I'm cool with it. Because Marcus Freeman, I just think, is a really good coach, and I think he's a very likable personality, and Notre Dame has a very likable team. Tom Noie going to join us 1 o'clock to talk about that. We're going to chirp and go up to Muncie, are we not, Eddie, coming up at 1:30?
Mike Uremovich, a.k.a. Coach U of the Ball State Cardinals, who will be playing the Purdue Boilermakers on Saturday, will join the program at 1:30, and then the voice of the Colts, Matt Taylor, will join us the final hour of the program. So
we got a loaded one lined up for today. Plenty of football talk from a college standpoint, from a pro standpoint. As a matter of fact, a guy that can break down both of those. He was, I think, a centerpiece, the final piece for the Colts playoff push that won them a Super Bowl when he came over from Tampa. Now you see him on ESPN. He can talk college football. He can talk NFL. He can talk Anthony Richardson. Booger McFarland of ESPN set to join us next as we get underway here on a Thursday. Booger McFarland next. Query & Company on the Fan. Rolling along Thursday edition, Query & Company here on The Fan. Again, coming up, big show lined up for you. We will talk a little Notre Dame football. Tom Noie joining us about 30 minutes from now. But joining me now on the always busy and available again to be sponsored guest line, Booger McFarland is, of course, a football analyst with ESPN. And I have always said, as a matter of fact, when I have done interviews with him in the past, I've always said, I think was the final piece towards getting the Colts a Super Bowl title, because when he went in there on that defensive line, everything changed. Everything changed when Booger McFarland became a Colt, but he joins us now to talk a little football, including the Colts, I would assume. Booger, how are you?
Doing well, man. How you doing?
We are good. Hey, look, it's the time of year where, like, it's not hope springs eternal. I guess it's fall springs eternal, but every team feels good about themselves at this point, right? And we could talk with you both professionally and collegiately, but let's begin with the NFL and your old team, the Colts, since we are in Indianapolis. Obviously, Daniel Jones is the quarterback they're going with. My first question for you would be this. In your time in the league and just being around teams, when you look at Anthony Richardson, who is still a young player, and a young player who theoretically has plenty of miles ahead of him, but in going from being starter to then being benched to back to a quarterback competition and then electing to go not with him but with Daniel Jones, in your opinion, what does that do to a young player, and does that kind of stall or cease the relationship with the franchise that originally brought him in, and it would be a change of scenery that's necessary?
Well, I mean, that's a very nuanced question there, and it would depend on a lot of factors. I think everything depends on the individual. And let's just use it specifically to Anthony Richardson. I don't know him. I just look at him from the outside. He seems like a very thoughtful guy. I think, based on what's happened, if he understands the facts, and that is that he was a quarterback that came out of University of Florida who needed to play to get better. And he hasn't really played a lot because he's been hurt. And because of those injuries, his development has been slowed, which has created a little bit of impatience, which allowed Indy to bring in another quarterback to create a competition, because the coach and the GM need to win. And especially now, once Mr. Irsay passed, I don't think anyone knows what the daughters are going to do moving forward. So this new regime has to win. And I think if you're Anthony, you got to look at it like that. Like, Shane's in a position where he's got to win to keep his job, and he's making the decision that's best for the organization, not what's best for Anthony. Anthony needs to play. He needs to go through growing pains. He needs to stay healthy. But right now, the head coach doesn't have that affordability to do that. So I think when you understand that, maybe it will allow you not to have some harsh feelings toward the head coach or the organization, and you will just say, you know what, if I were in Shane's position, what would I do? And so hopefully Anthony looks at it that way. I don't know if he can, but that's kind of how I read the situation in Indy as of today.
You raise an interesting point, and you obviously were part of this organization, Booger McFarland, our guest, in talking about the late Jim Irsay, who I don't think anybody disputes. This was an owner that was football through and through. He grew up around it, from carrying towels to writing the checks, right? And with that, and maybe when you were here, it was too nuanced to know this in totality, but do you think that he was, in fact, for example, when Richardson first came in, do you think that he was the kind of guy that made orders to his general manager, or that trusted his general manager to make those decisions and was there for guidance if need be?
I don't think there's any doubt. I think he was the guy who hired you and let you do your job, based on the fact that how he, if you look at the people that he's hired, Chris Ballard, Tony Dungy, Jim Caldwell, those are people who don't want to be micromanaged. And so I think that knowing those people, knowing Mr. Irsay in the brief time that I did spend with him, I don't think there's any doubt he is the type of owner that's not going to be like, he's the anti-Jerry Jones. I'll just put it that way.
Right. And with that, I think that there was, it's interesting, Booger, because there was a report today, and it can get slippery getting into the nuances of it, of the fact that the last few years of Jim Irsay's life, the addiction that he had battled with had really gripped him, and that had removed him from, say, day-to-day type things. At no point am I saying this as an indictment on Jim Irsay as a character, but from a football standpoint, if you had ambiguity, or if you have it right now at the ownership standpoint, does that make it difficult for those people to kind of know the direction or the path that they are expected to follow other than simply winning games. But in terms of timeline that you talked about, does it complicate things of not knowing exactly how firm your footing is?
Yeah, I think it can complicate things. But you know what uncomplicates it, man? It's just communication. Like, I think we're in a day and time now where we shouldn't be guessing. Like, there's too much money, there's too many people's livelihoods at stake. You know, to me, this is a conversation that should be had. You know, the daughters and whoever's in charge, you know, once ownership has been kind of taken over, to me, that's a conversation, especially before the season. It's one thing if we were in season, but the fact that this happened before the season, and I don't think that, or should I say, I don't doubt that this hasn't happened. I'm just saying
Right.
what I would have liked to happen is that they should have had a conversation with the general manager and the head coach. Here are our expectations. Here's what we expect. And just have open dialogue. Like, too many times we try to guess what someone is thinking. We're all adults here. We're all grown people. We have families. Let's just have open communication, and we can agree to disagree, but at least nobody is blindsided by how we think. So I hope the girls talk to Chris. I hope that Chris, talk to Shane if Shane wasn't in the meeting. That way everybody understands where we are. Because I would hate for our people to lose their jobs. And this is not just Shane losing his job. If Shane gets fired, there's an entire staff. So there's 35, 40 people that are going to lose their job. And so before we go down that path, let's have open dialogue. If they say, you know what, we like where we are, we're not going to make any rash judgments or rush judgments, then maybe you bring back Anthony at some point and give him an opportunity to grow and get better. I don't know. I just know that we're in a time where there's no need to guess. Like, it shouldn't happen. And maybe the girls say, you know what, we didn't hire Shane, we didn't hire Chris. We're going to go get our own head coach and GM. Maybe that's the case. And the conversation isn't needed. I don't know. I just know that there shouldn't be any surprises when you're dealing with adults, grown people, and when we're dealing with a multi-billion-dollar business. Communication should be at the forefront.
How would you assess the Colts roster aside from the, obviously quarterback, as you know, Booger McFarland, quarterback's the most important position in sports, right? NFL quarterback. So the Colts are going with a guy that, I think they're kind of hoping does have that Alex Smith, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield change of scenery, trajectory change. But aside from the quarterback, the overall roster for the Colts, you see it or assess it how?
I think the roster is very talented. I think most people would say that the reason the Colts haven't achieved what most people think they should is because the quarterback has been holding them back, henceforth why we have a quarterback competition and why people are down on Anthony Richardson. If the Colts had, let's just call it average quarterback play, average quarterback play where the guy didn't turn the football over, quarterback was able to distribute the ball to the playmakers, they got talent on that team. The offensive line is pretty good. Like, they paid a lot of those guys on the offensive line. Defensively, they got talent. They got some young guys in the secondary. So if Daniel Jones plays average, like top 15 quarterback, let's just say he's somewhere between 15 and 18 as far as QBR, how he plays, I wouldn't be surprised if the Colts get 10 or 11 wins because the roster around him is that good.
The league itself obviously has been designed, and this is why people love it, Booger, right? The league is set up for parity, and by that I mean that by structure you shouldn't be down for multiple seasons, and you see teams kind of come out of nowhere every year. When you look right now, if the combination of scheduling as well as just roster in general or players growing into their own, give me a team in the NFL that you look at and you say, you know what? It's not going to surprise me if by like November or December they are this year's, say, like Minnesota from a year ago or whatever it may be, where you're like, these guys are better than I thought that people thought they were going to be.
Well, when you throw Minnesota, now you bring in 14, 15 wins. So I'm not going to say that, but here's how I'll preface it. I'll just use the last part of your statement. A team that's going to be better than we think. Chicago. I think Ben Johnson is a really good coach. I think he'll understand how to get the best out of Caleb Williams, whatever that is. I think they'll be pretty good. I think everybody's darling is Denver. I think Denver's going to be better than a lot of people think they are, and people already think they're going to be pretty good. I think as you go around, I think Geno with the Raiders.
Bingo. The
Geno's
Raiders intrigue me.
Yeah, Geno's a professional quarterback, and here's what I mean. He understands how to play the position. He understands what not to do. Is Geno great? Nah, but Geno can be, somewhere between 12 and 15 in QBR. That's going to be really good with how they play the football. They can run it with Ashton Genty. I think it's a certain style. Pete Carroll understands how to win. So I think those would be two teams I would look at: Chicago in the NFC and then Las Vegas in the AFC.
Do you see football differently now than you did as a player?
Well, I think you have to, just because it's so much more money now involved in the game than when I played. The game has gotten younger, meaning, I was a guy who was a 29, 30-year-old guy on a team. Nowadays, most guys on the team are 25, 26 years old, so the league has gotten younger, and the league is less physical. And so, yeah, football has changed, man. I mean, some of the blocking schemes, things that you can't do anymore. You can't blindside anybody. You can't hit the receiver above the waist. The backside lineman can't cut anymore. So the game has gotten a little softer. It's still a great game. It's just different than the game that we played. When I get amongst guys who I played with, some of the safeties say they couldn't play now because they couldn't hit anybody. Some of the offensive linemen say they couldn't play because they couldn't cut anybody. So the game has just changed. It doesn't mean it's worse. It's just that because of the safety and because of some of the factors, they've cleaned the game up a little bit. So guys like me, when they get to be 45, 50 years old, may not have some of the injuries that our predecessors had.
I want to discuss real quick college football with you, Booger McFarland, before we let you go. Of course, football analyst for ESPN. I'm a diehard Clemson fan. It's going to be a big one on Saturday, but probably nobody in Indianapolis other than the two of us right now care about Clemson and LSU. But I'm curious of your thoughts in general, just on the college football landscape, and with that I mean the playoff. Are you a proponent of expand the playoff in terms of the number of teams in? Do you like the way they have it right now? Where do you see kind of the landscape going with all of this?
There was some intrigue. I liked it at 4. Once it went to 12, I was excited because you got a chance to see some of the playoff games on home campuses. I think they're going to add a couple more. I am not going past 16. I'm not in favor of going past 16. I think eventually the round number at 16 is probably where we're going to go. It just makes sense. 12 with buys and all that, it kind of gets clunky. I think they settle on 16. It's kind of uniform when it comes to the NCAA tournament because there's a bracket of 16 already in the basketball tournament. And so I think eventually, whether that's next year, they got to have an answer by December 1st for this year, or whenever it is. I think eventually we're going to settle on 16.
Well, the good news, if it's 16, is that still gets LSU a chance after they lose to Clemson on Saturday, right?
And whoever loses, whether it's Ohio State, Texas, LSU, Clemson, Notre Dame, Miami, everybody is still in the fight.
Correct. No, you're right about that.
Come Sunday morning.
You're right about that because you gotta rattle it off after that. But you are correct, Booger. I appreciate the time as always, and always enjoy seeing you on ESPN. And great insights. Look forward to talking to you perhaps again over the course of the season, but we'll certainly be watching as well.
Always, anytime. Thank you, sir.
Booger McFarland joining us on the guest line here. All right, we talked about the college football playoff and expanding it. Perhaps one of the teams that was in it last year and is primed to perhaps return to the college football playoff is Notre Dame, and Tom Noie, who covers them, joins us top of the hour here, Query & Company on the Fan. Thank you to Booger McFarland for his time talking about college football, the NFL. Really good perspective. And really, really good on television. It goes without saying when you talk about Booger McFarland. We were discussing in college football and the aspect of that. This chair, can you hear all that, Eddie?
Maybe a little.
Can we get some WD-40 in here for this chair? I mean, I know maybe I move around a lot, but come on. College football, and Tom Noie going to join us coming up here in just a couple of minutes. Listen, I'm excited for college football for this reason.
Starts tonight, Jake. We got a ton of games.
What's the biggest game tonight? Are there any? I have not looked at the schedule for tonight. Are there any ranked games tonight? There's probably some action, right?
So there is a game where there is one team ranked.
Okay.
Yes.
That team that is ranked comes out of what conference? We're going to guess right here.
Oh, poop. I know they're in the Mountain West in basketball. Yeah, Mountain West.
Boise State.
Can you say that again?
Boise State.
So you go, okay, Boise State?
Yep.
Yes, you are correct.
And they are taking on
South Florida.
Okay.
5:30. That's the first game for today.
One of the things about college football, there are two things about college football that are just awesome.
Got a couple Big Ten teams tonight. Nebraska is at Cincinnati on ESPN at 9 o'clock. Game. Miami of Ohio at Wisconsin at 9 on the Big Ten Network. By the way,
love
you go
the fact that
Wisconsin
they're starting with heavy hitter games here. I mean, when you look at, there are two this weekend to kick it off that are massive.
I forgot
Texas,
about Rutgers.
Ohio State is huge.
Forgot about Rutgers. They're also at 6.
Okay.
So 3.
Who does Rutgers play?
Rutgers faces Ohio, the Bobcats.
Doesn't Wyoming play tonight?
The Pokes?
Yes. You know I'm a Wyoming fan.
Yes, they are at Akron taking on the Zips. Got to poke those Zips.
I should drive over to Akron. It's only a 5-hour drive.
7 o'clock. You may have time.
Yeah, let's go. Telling you, I'm a Wyoming fan. Struggle last year for Wyoming. They were on the struggle bus, but I like Wyoming. But I love the fact that there are two marquee, massive games, obviously, to kick things off. I mean, Texas, Ohio State is huge. I think there is so much expectation around Arch Manning, understandably so. And then the thing about that game, either way, assuming it's, even if you get blown out, but assuming that it stays a close game, both those teams are going to have plenty of, and for, Texas probably has the more rigorous schedule. I'm not looking at the schedule, so I don't know. But the same can be said for Clemson and LSU, as we just talked about with Booger McFarland. Like, either one of those teams drops that game when you start talking about the college football playoff. And the college football playoff, to me, when we talk about the expansion of it, is a fascinating debate because initially and originally the word when it came to college football, in a playoff was, well, a college football playoff because you can't play games on back-to-back nights or 2 and 3 nights or whatever. It would take too long and take kids away from class. And then eventually the entire civilized world figured out, wait a minute, that all takes place during basically winter break anyway. They're not even in class. It's between semesters. But I think Booger McFarland's correct. I think 16 is probably the magic number there, and that's where they will end up with it. I just hope that, and I know that this gets into a quagmire of conversation, but it would be my hope that we don't get into a situation when it comes to the college football playoff where you are automatically forced to, okay, you've got to take 4 out of the Big Ten, 4 out of the SEC, 4 out of the ACC. Part of the magic of it.
Don't forget about the Pac-2.
Is there anybody you feel worse for than Washington State and Oregon State? They sat around and everybody started, filling up their dance card elsewhere, and they're like, guys, we're part of the conference, right? Well, not really. And then you get, the realignment in general is absurd. But my point being, I hope that it doesn't just become, I would much rather see, and I think most people would much rather see the best team out of the Mountain West or the best team out of what's a non-power, the MAC,
Yeah.
get a shot over the fifth best or fourth best team out of the SEC or Big Ten. I think most people this year in the Big Ten, okay, Ohio State, sure. Penn State, sure, even though I told you how Penn State season's going to go. It goes the same every year. Start out 5 or 6-0, lead Ohio State in the third quarter 17-3, get excited, lose 24-17, turn around 2 weeks later, lose to Minnesota, off to the Insight.com Bowl. But I digress. Ohio State, Penn State.
Oregon?
Sure, Oregon. And then, maybe in Indiana or Illinois.
Or Michigan.
But when you start getting into a team just because they are 9-4 out of the Big Ten, Minnesota, or for that matter, Indiana, if they've got a couple of losses, I'm speaking from a national standpoint, or Illinois, unless they have a dominant year, would you rather see those teams get in or, a 13-0 Akron or a 12-1 Boise State? I think it's just like the NCAA tournament.
Bingo.
I mean, with the NCAA tournament, everybody and their brother would much rather see 29-3 College of Charleston than 17-14 Arkansas, because that's the magic of the NCAA tournament. And college football doesn't need any more magic thrown into it per se, because it already has everybody hooked in. And the other thing with college football, and I hope that and I get it. I get on Thursday night the importance of the MAC, for example. The MAC's been really smart because they get that, it becomes ubiquitous on Thursday night and synonymous with Thursday night. The MAC does. But I hope college football learns from the NFL in one area, and that is that the NFL, once it really started expanding and going and playing 3 and 4 times a week, I think it took away a little bit of the magic. The NFL is still the 800-pound gorilla, don't get me wrong. But there was a fatigue factor that came in a little bit when they started doing Monday Night Football, Thursday Night Football, Saturday football, Sunday football. The specialty of it goes away a little bit. And with college football, Saturday is for college football. I mean, it's just how it is.
By the way, Action's on Wednesday nights.
Is it now on Wednesdays?
Yeah, it's Wednesday, so they don't go up against NFL.
That's smart, right?
Yeah,
that's very smart. But Notre Dame and what is expected out of the Irish. Tom Noie, who was fun. We had a lot of fun with him last year during the college football playoff run, covers the Irish and joins us next. although I guess it was, that the college football playoff last year had Indiana Notre Dame. We talked plenty about it. Tom Noie became, really, to be honest with you, we should probably have him on the payroll because he essentially became our South Bend correspondent when it comes to the Irish. South Bend Tribune, and now joining us on the program. Tom, your worst nightmare's recurring. We're calling you again.
I go to that mailbox every single day thinking I'm going to get some sort of check from you guys, and it comes up empty. And now I decide just to come back for another year.
Listen, join the club. I don't know if you know this or not. We actually are volunteers here at the radio station.
Nice.
Let's begin with this, and that is I thought, a year ago, it goes without saying the year that Notre Dame had and just how good they were, and I really like Marcus Freeman. And I like Marcus Freeman because of his kind of tactical approach, and it seemed to me like Notre Dame was a team last year that just didn't make a lot of mistakes, and that was one of the things. When you have a young coach, you're trying to kind of feel out what it is that makes them a good coach. How will, if in any way, shape, or form, be it approach or personnel, how will Notre Dame look different now than what we when we last saw them?
From a personnel standpoint, it's hard to believe, but this team might be better than what it was last season. Like you look out in the very little that we were able to see on the practice field, and they've got dudes just everywhere. And it used to only be certain ones, like a handful. Now it's this guy, that guy. He's a sophomore. He's a freshman. He's a redshirt junior. So the personnel and the depth and the talent and the athleticism is almost across the board better than what it was in 2024. And I still think for as much as they did last season and winning 13 in a row and going 14-2 and going to the college football national championship game, I still think this offense, we have no idea the ceiling of what they can do under offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock, because they were playing so much from behind last year with Riley Leonard coming in as a new quarterback. He missed all of spring because of his injury. He really just got going in at the start of camp in August, and we just started to see what they could be when everything ended. So I think offensively, I don't know if it's going to be the old 3 yards in a cloud of dust, let's run the ball, let's win with defense, like it has been for so many years up here.
Yeah, the quarterback, let's begin, with in talking about offensively speaking, Tom, just the quarterback position, because anytime that you are replacing a guy, that is, you have an open competition. We've talked plenty about that with football in these parts. What was it about, I believe Carr is the one that ultimately they go with there. So what do you believe he brings to the table, or that Marcus Freeman utilized as the reason to tab him?
He can make all the throws and make them well. Like he'll fit some of his throws into the tightest windows that have no business being there, but he gets it there. And it's just it's a dynamic from the quarterback position that frankly, this program hasn't had, where he's big, he's strong, he's athletic, he can move the ball down the field, and they can move it at a different pace than what they did with Riley Leonard. Like, yeah, Riley Leonard was the quarterback last year. Yes, Riley Leonard won 14 games and got him to the national championship game. But if a play broke down, or if Riley Leonard wasn't sure about a certain call, guess what? He's tucking it and he's running it. Whereas C.J. Carr is going to be like, if I don't have this guy, I'm going to look here. If I look here and I don't like it, I'm going to look there. I'm going to move the ball down the field, and I feel like I can make every throw. And I just think at the end of the day, when it came down to C.J. Carr and Kenny Minchie, they like the upside and the potential of what C.J. Carr can be and who he can be. Maybe not right off the bat, but maybe 2-3 weeks down the line, we'll see a different C.J. Carr than what we're going to see on Sunday night.
You know what's funny, Tom, and we don't know this. I mean, that's the thing about college football every year is we really don't know. We can go with reputation of teams, but we don't know necessarily how good that team's going to be one year to the next. But if you look at Notre Dame's schedule, I mean, obviously starting in Miami against Miami in Hard Rock Stadium, that's a challenge. And then you come home and play Texas A&M, and I always believe that Texas A&M, there is no bigger preseason muscle team that usually fades than Texas A&M. But nonetheless, those are two big games to start. I look at that, and then I think they have two really tricky games from September into October, and that's Arkansas and Boise State, because – and NC State also. My point being long-winded here, I've been one that has always kind of knocked on Notre Dame for their schedule. I don't think you can say that this year. Their schedule to me seems as daunting as any they've had in quite some time. You agree or disagree?
It could be tricky tough because when you get into this business, and we've seen it so many times up here with this program, when you get into the business of counting wins, guess what happens? Marshall, Stanford, Louisville, at a bad Clemson team when Clemson was there to be beaten but couldn't be beaten last year against Northern Illinois. So it's everybody looks at Miami and Texas A&M. There's a week off in between there that helps Notre Dame too, but they look at those two games and say, boy, if they can get to 2-0, they're going to 12-0. But with this schedule, something's always going to happen. Whether it's the first ever trip to Fayetteville to play Arkansas at 11 o'clock in the morning, whether it's Boise State coming in here, maybe USC gets back to being USC, and then you've got the trip to Pittsburgh that might be tricky in October. So it looks manageable, but one thing we know about the Notre Dame football team as you cover it, it's never as manageable as you think it's going to be when everything starts.
I'm telling you, man, NC State, NC State this year, Tom, so I'm a Clemson fan, right? And I know people get tired of me mentioning that, but NC State is one of those programs. They're kind of like Iowa in the Big Ten. Every 3 or 4 years, they get a senior-laden team that you go, whoa, wait a minute, and they're really good, and then they kind of go back into just, obscurity for a couple of years, and they hibernate, so to speak. But they're tricky. I have no idea if NC State's going to be good this year. The fact that it's at Notre Dame probably helps. And I think you could say the same for Boise State for both of those games, right? And then Southern, maybe that's – do you believe in trap games? Because then you got Southern Cal on the 18th. So you got those two games, and Southern Cal is Southern Cal, and it's a rivalry game. Do you believe in quote-unquote trap games of young players looking too far down the road?
When you talk to the players up here, Jake, every game is a trap game for them because they know every game is some other team's Super Bowl. Like everybody's pointing to Miami, and everybody from Miami is going to get up to play Notre Dame. And then you got Texas A&M coming in because they're going to be up because they got beat at home last year by Texas A&M. Boise State, you can go right on down the line. Every game is a trap game for this program because just when you think you can relax and kind of catch your breath a little bit, that's where a team that nobody sees coming is going to step up and play the game of their lives, like in Northern Illinois, like a Marshall, and beat a Notre Dame team where everybody says, yeah, they're going to win that game.
Tom Noie is our guest talking about Notre Dame, the Irish, of course, getting underway at Miami. Tom, Marcus Freeman, I want to go back to this. When you have a situation where a guy kind of in unforeseen circumstances ascends to the head coaching position and then kind of before our eyes grows into that role just in terms of approach, if you will. Have you seen him change at all from the day that he was announced and hired in terms of his maturity, in terms of maybe, not that he was immature, but you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like maybe how guarded he was, etc. Is there, or has he been the same guy the whole time?
He is so much more comfortable in his own skin in who he is, and maybe more importantly, what he represents as the head coach of the University of Notre Dame football program. Like the first year, maybe the first year and a half, he was really guarded. He never strayed from the script. He never wanted to smile. It was always business, especially in the press conference settings where he didn't want to let his guard down. He wanted to just stick to the script and stick to the answer that everybody believed he should give. And in recent years, the last couple of years, he's kind of gotten away from that. And it's so refreshing because you see that he's human and he's got another side to him. And it's just something where he's much more likable than the last guy that was here who, yeah, he won a lot, but he didn't really have that great of a sense of humor. He didn't want to stray from the script. And when he tried to do something humorous, he was so serious 900% of the time that nobody around the program got it. So it's like you don't root for Marcus Freeman, but you really like him as a person because, let's face it, you walk into this job with no head coaching experience. This job could eat him alive within 2 years, 3 years, to the point where he's like, you know what, we don't know if he's the guy. And he's done the complete opposite to where people look at Marcus Freeman and say, boy, he might coach at Notre Dame for the next 10 years.
I mean, he definitely, like, with right away, he just seemed like a dude that, I don't know, seemed like in control. And again, Tom, I'll say it again. The most unlikable thing about Marcus Freeman is how likable he is.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Like, seriously, because of some of the people that we've dealt with here, like I go all the way back to Lou Holtz, so you rattle it off. Lou Holtz, Bob Davie, Charlie Weiss, Brian Kelly, Tyrone Willingham. Not the most warm and fuzzy guys, and not the guys that you feel like the one reason why Mike Bray was so beloved as the men's basketball coach was anybody that came into contact in a relationship or whatever with Mike Bray, they said, you know what? He's a good dude because he sounds like he seems like one of those guys you just want to go out and have a beer with.
Right.
And Marcus Freeman is kind of the same way where okay, it's he's the head coach and we're the media and we know where we stand and he knows where he stands, but there's something about him where you're just like, you know what? Win or lose, it doesn't really matter. I kind of like that guy.
This might be speaking a little too deep in the weeds in terms of roster and in terms of lineups. But I am curious because there are two guys, not one but two, that are young players at Notre Dame that have come out of Indianapolis high schools that came in with some praise. Cam Herron on the offensive line out of Warren, and then Mark Zachary, the fourth out of Ben Davis, who's a corner. But they're young players, and Notre Dame is obviously an elite program. Either one of those guys get significant reps this year, or is that not really the MO for Notre Dame at those positions?
For Cam Herron, probably tough because he's along the offensive line, and this offensive line is so deep and so talented and so versatile to where maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years ago where they didn't have so many interchangeable parts, a guy like Cam Herron walks in off the street of Indianapolis and can maybe find his way into the lineup if there's an injury. But they're so interchangeable now where Joe Rudolph is like, all right, if we lose the left guard, we're going to do this. And then if we lose the right guard or the right tackle, we're going to do this. Cam Herron's got a chance later on down the line. It's just he doesn't need to kind of push his way into the rotation. And it's totally different on the other side of the ball with Mark Zachary. We got the depth chart, the first official depth chart released by Notre Dame on Tuesday, and there's Mark Zachary as a number 2 backup cornerback. And the one thing that would give Mark Zachary fans hope is a year ago at this time, nobody had any idea of a certain cornerback who was a true freshman, who had no business playing, who had no business even thinking of seeing the field. And by the end of the year, he was a freshman All-American, and that was Leonard Moore. And now he's a sophomore, and he's on everybody's All-American list. So, but Mark Zachary and Dallas Golden, 2 true freshman corners, are both backups at the corner spot. And you never know. Like, we never saw Leonard Moore coming. He wasn't going to play. All of a sudden, Benjamin Morrison goes down with a season-ending hip injury. Leonard Moore's got to start. You know what? Leonard Moore's pretty good. They love what Mark Zachary might be able to give them one day down the line.
Tom, when you look at Notre Dame and, this conversation that I'm about to bring up has really kind of ceased. Tom Noie is our guest here. There was so much talk, and it almost seemed like a fait accompli at one point that Notre Dame would join the Big Ten. And I think that fait accompli was from people outside of Notre Dame that just thought, like, inevitably Notre Dame was going to have to, with conference realignment, get on board. They're obviously still playing that ACC schedule, and they have maintained their quote-unquote independence. Did they weather that storm, or is this a conversation that is going to, every 3 years resurface?
It'll resurface from everybody on the outside, but I can tell you Pete Bavaku is very confident that even as far out as past 2030, maybe 2033, that they can remain independent, and they wanted to remain independent with 3 factors. BC college football playoff access, they have that. Homes for their men's and women's basketball programs and the rest of their Olympic sports. They have that in the ACC and in the Big Ten with hockey, and their television deal. And they're wrapped up past 2030, I think 32, with NBC. So with all the shuffling and all the pieces being moved around the college football board that have happened and have happened in the last, 4, 5, 6 years, everybody looks at Notre Dame and says, yep, that's it. They're done. They have to join a conference. Notre Dame, with each passing year, 24, 25, now into 26, They look at where college athletics is, and they feel so strongly that their position cannot be any better as a football independent now than maybe what it was 4 or 5 years ago.
By the way, doesn't 2030 sound like it's like 50 years from now?
It does.
Like, wait a
and
minute.
you know what?
Wait a minute. This is concerning, right? Like, there are kids entering right now that are like seniors in high school. They're the class of 2030 for college. You're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Hold on. With that, when you talk about the playoff, Tom, it's interesting to me because, for example, if you look at the Irish's schedule, and we just talked about it, I mean, you open up with Miami, and then you got Texas A&M. Would you rather? Do you think you have, if you were the football gods, would you rather a team, if you had to pick one, are you better, if you start out 0-2 and then you run the table, are you in a better situation than if you are 10 or 11-0 and suffer your first loss midway through December? Or not December, but I guess late November. You know what I mean? Right before the committee has to select. It is my feeling that recency bias comes into play when looking at those things. Your thoughts?
It's better, and we saw it last year. It's better if you're going to lose, you better lose early. Because I'll speak from experience in covering Notre Dame last year. Notre Dame was so far off that college football map after that Northern Illinois game, where it was you'd almost have to, people would almost have to be fined around South Bend if you talked anything about the college football playoff after September 4th, because everybody was like, you know what, that's so far away, we can't worry about that. And it was great because nobody paid any attention to Notre Dame. Everybody wrote Notre Dame off and said, there's no way they're going to run the table and get to a college football playoff game after losing to freaking Northern Illinois. Notre Dame just went back to work and just kept winning and kept winning and kept winning. And other teams, as the season got later, they kept losing. And this team lost and that team lost. They were able to sneak up on everybody. Whereas I think if they had if they had maybe run the table and then gone out to USC and lost at USC, then the drumbeat would be, well, they don't deserve it. You got to get an SEC team in there now.
Yeah, it is fascinating, right? Just that overall. I mean, the Northern Illinois game, I keep forgetting about that. I remember when that happened thinking they're out, right? They're out.
It was over. And I wrote it. I said, don't even bother thinking about the college football playoff. That's so far away, it might as well be on Mars at that point.
You wrote that, Tom? I mean, I'll give you. I guess it's forever right there in print, right? You can't escape it now that you wrote it. Don't you know what I mean? You just said forget about it, but hey,
I did say forget about it. Absolutely, I did. Yeah, I wrote that.
Listen, okay. Last question, Tom. This one, I'm going to allow you, Tom Noie, to be the judge and jury on this. Okay. This is a very important question. Please handle the answer with responsibly. Responsibly. Not like you did after that Northern Illinois game where you were off. Okay. This is the age-old debate in Indianapolis. I need you, Tom Noie, South Bend Tribune, to tell me whether I'm right or wrong, or just your thoughts on this. I won't tell you which way I lean. When we in Indianapolis talk about college football, and we talk about Indiana-Purdue, or basketball, and we talk about Indiana-Purdue, and then in basketball-wise, we mix in Butler. Football-wise here, we'll mix in Ball State. We're going to talk to their coach coming up here in just a couple of minutes. Is Notre Dame a local team for the Indianapolis sports market?
No, absolutely not. And I'll go back to, I'll dust off the old Crossroads Classic down at Bankers Life / Gainbridge / whatever the name of that place is, when it's Butler and Notre Dame and IU and Purdue, and the fan support in downtown Indianapolis when Notre Dame would play would either play Indiana or Purdue ran like maybe a distant sixth. There were Butler fans, there were IU fans, there were Purdue fans, there were Pacers fans, there were Cincinnati Reds fans. There were no Notre Dame fans ever in Bankers Life Fieldhouse, Gainbridge Fieldhouse, to make that a worthwhile 3-hour bus ride down US 31 for Notre Dame. So it's almost like Indianapolis proper, West Lafayette, Bloomington, and then everybody else of the rest of the state. Oh, by the way, maybe we'll think of Notre Dame if they go to a college football playoff or go to the national championship game. But no, I don't think Notre Dame is quote local to the Indianapolis market whatsoever.
When you travel to cover Notre Dame, and maybe obviously outside of the Midwest, like if you're in Vegas or you're in LA or whatever it may be, right? What state do you think most people immediately associate with Notre Dame?
Illinois?
I think that might be right.
Maybe?
Michigan?
Well, everybody's like, well, Notre Dame, yeah, that's in the Midwest, but what state is it in?
Yeah, it is fascinating to me. The reason I say it, Tom, is because a lot of people give us grief, and probably rightly so, when I mention, Indiana teams like to start out the football season, and I say Indiana, Purdue, Ball State, whatever, and people are like, what about Notre Dame? And I'm like, I get it, but Notre Dame is its own entity. Like, it's a national brand, and clearly its theological connection is the epicenter of that because it is the most prestigious Catholic university in America, right? So it is a national brand. I just don't think that people think Notre Dame of Indiana. You know what I mean?
College basketball writers every year select their all-district teams. There's seldom a time where there's one or even two or three Notre Dame men's basketball players. Even when Jaron Grant was a national All-American in 2015, it was a struggle to get him on an all-district team, and all-district teams for the Basketball Writers Association are done by state because people forget Notre Dame is in Indiana because they play in the ACC, or before that they played in the Big East. So there would be deserving guys that would be left off those teams, and you'd have like the fourth or fifth guy from Indiana or Purdue or Michigan State make those teams because people forget about Notre Dame and being in Indiana.
You've successfully backed me up on this, Tom. Listen, our radio brotherhood and fist bump continues. I absolutely love it. I'll leave you with this trivia question. What Notre Dame basketball player is the one that forced Bob Knight to go to his zone for the first time? You remember?
I've covered Notre Dame men's basketball for 27 years. That's maybe a little before my time.
It is before your time. You are correct.
I'll have to call Digger on my way out the door here.
David Rivers, baby. David Rivers.
You go.
Knight went to the zone very briefly against Notre Dame because of David Rivers. Tom, appreciate the time as always. It is the Irish. It is Miami of Florida. That game on the 31st, which if my math is correct says that is Saturday. But appreciate the time
Sunday
as always,
night.
Tom. What's
Sunday night, brother. Sunday night.
So, see, my math is wrong. I should know. Here's the thing. Tom, I'm going to leave you with this fun fact. I've told Eddie this. This is incredible. Are you ready for the most amazing fun fact of all time, Tom? I keep saying that we're almost done here, but listen to this.
I know.
True story. I've had 4 serious, adult relationships in my life in terms of romantically speaking, okay? The first serious girlfriend I had, her birthday, August 26th. When we broke up, about a year later, I started dating a girl whose birthday is August 27th. The next girl after that I dated's birthday is August 28th. And the girl that I'm currently dating, who I have very happily for 20 years now, her birthday is tomorrow, which is the 29th.
You are one weird dude.
That is the weirdest thing ever, is it not? I mean, we would flunk a lot of math classes on the mathematical possibility of that. But what I'm getting at is for that reason, I get completely confused at the end of August as to what day anything is.
Nice.
But I know that her birthday is tomorrow. Tom, appreciate it, man.
You got it, my man. Have a great we'll talk to you.
Tom Noie from the South Bend Tribune. So I do know that Shannon's birthday is tomorrow, Eddie.
You got anything planned, Jake?
I have to go to Nashville for IndyCar.
Boy.
We are going to dinner tonight to her favorite restaurant. How about that?
You're not revealing where it is?
I'm not.
Okay. You don't want Shannon's fan base showing up to disappoint you?
I don't want J&B skulking around. Which is
well, little do you know, Jake.
They're
she already
probably doing
invited
dinner
him.
tomorrow. What's that?
Little do you know, she already invited
That's
him.
right. She's all excited for her birthday to make requests on the J&B takeover.
Are you gonna clean up a little bit? You're a little scruffy.
I am. You don't like this? The white of how about this? The white of my beard that really starts to show up once it gets to a certain length there. For what it's worth.
You start looking like Grandpa Jake.
Hell. That is the reality of my age group. Yes. Not necessarily, but to some extent. You want to go up to Muncie? Are we going to do that? Funcy Muncie?
Funcy Muncie. I haven't heard that one before, but yes, we are.
You've never heard Funcy Muncie?
No.
Oh, yeah, man. Muncie's where it's at. Ball State football. Getting underway. They have a new head coach. He joined the program when he got the job, and he will join us to preview what the Cards Chirp Chirp have in store, and he's going to do it next. I can already hear in his car, caller What's Happening Todd, getting fired up for Chirp Chirp, the Ball State Fighting Football Cardinals. Jake, Coach U is about to shock the state with them Ball State Cardinals over Purdue, the first win on an undefeated season in Muncie, Todd says. Just stick around, Coach, when you dominate the college football world in Muncie and grow things at Ball State. That's exactly what I think people are hoping for. One step at a time, though, for Mike Uremovich and the Ball State Football Cardinals. And the first-year coach for Ball State joining us now, return guest to the program. Coach, how are you?
Good. Great to be on. Good to talk to you again.
Let's begin with this. You know, this challenge for you guys with Purdue I'm going to get to, but I want to know this. Whenever you get, and you are not a new figure in terms of head coach. You have been in that situation before, but you are new to Ball State. And I'm curious, when you have that period and you go through camp and you get set for the season, is that more about the roster learning their coach or the coach learning his roster?
I think it's a little of both now, because with the transfer portal, you know, we had a bunch of new guys that went through our off-season program with us in January and through spring ball, but we added 18 new players after spring ball was over. You know, so you're trying to learn those guys and see what they're good at and what they need, obviously, to continue to improve on, and they're trying to learn you as a coach and our staff. So I think it's both ways, honestly.
You've got a quarterback in Kyle Kelly that, you know, is an upperclassman but does not have extended experience under center. What was it about the quarterback that led you to go that way, and what sort of offense do we expect to see?
He's really dynamic, man. He can run, he can throw the football, he makes really good decisions, and just throughout my career and as an offensive coordinator and head coach, we've always wanted a dual threat guy there. I just think it's a lot harder to play defense when they got to play against 11 instead of, 10, and a guy that can't really run around very much and make plays with his feet. So he fits everything we want athletically, and he's a really, really good leader. And you said it, he's been around here a while. I mean, he knows Ball State better than I do. He's been here a lot longer than I have. So it's been fun to watch him grow our offense and learn it in spring ball, but then have all summer to kind of really get to grips with what we're asking him to do. And he's had a really good training camp.
When you look at, Coach, the reality of college football in 2025, transfer portal, NIL, all of those things, right? And in particular in the MAC, the reality is that a lot of times if you get a guy that's an upperclassman, they're going to go NIL, seeking elsewhere.
Sure.
And I know that you're new to the league itself, but I am curious. Does a coach in 2025, because of the roster rollover or lack of rollover, does a coach need to be more versatile than he did 10 or 15 years ago and have flexibility of system or scheme that he didn't have to have 10 or 15 years ago?
We've always tried to have that. Yeah, we have our offense that we want to run, but one year you might have a great tight end, so you're going to feature that guy a little more, and maybe next year you're not as good there, but you're better at wide receiver. But you definitely have to have that. We are recruiting to our systems, but like you said, you might have a guy that fits your system really well, and then he decides after he's named first team All-MAC to go in the portal. So we talk with our staff and a lot about, all right, this is our team for this year. They're here now. Let's coach them all. We're going to go and then try to, after the year, seniors are going to leave. Unfortunately, some guys will go in the portal, and then you go recruit in that portal window, and then that is your team for the next year. I mean, there's two things we're trying to do. We're trying to get a bunch of really good high school players in here that we can develop, knowing that you might lose them at some point, but hopefully they're playing so well for you that someone does maybe try to take them. And then you're also going to have to address your needs in the portal. So it's really year by year. And that's college football right now.
You obviously are beginning with a familiar foe, familiar for you, I mean, and that is Purdue. You will be playing at Ross-Ade coming up on Saturday at noon, Ball State and Purdue. You anticipate to see what out of Purdue, and you anticipate to see what in terms of what you're hoping to see from your guys?
Well, I hope from us you see a disciplined, physical football team and that has fun playing football, that you're going to be able to tell by the way we play that the guys enjoy playing together and for each other, and that we're not going to beat ourselves and we're going to be physical in every element of the game. As far as Purdue goes, I feel like we have a better idea about what they'll do defensively because their head coach and defensive coordinator were together at UNLV. So they're going to be coming in and running the same systems. Offensively, it's a little different. They have a play caller that came from USC, but he wasn't calling the plays there. And the last time he called plays was 4 or 5 years ago at Missouri. So we've had to watch USC film. We'd have to watch Missouri film and a bunch of other spots that the assistant coaches on that side of the ball have came from. So in the first quarter for us defensively, we're going to have to figure out, okay, this is what they're going to do on offense.
How much of, when you're going through, spring ball and everything else, and you have an opener with Purdue, and then you go to Auburn, which is obviously going to be a challenge going down there in a big-time environment, how much or when do you kind of shift from focusing on you to focusing on opponent?
Now, as a staff, we spend time on our first 4 games in the summer getting ready for our opponents. But as soon as training camp starts, all we worry about is developing our players and to fit the systems that we have and installing our offense and defense. Because there's things you got to put in camp that we might not use till week 5, but you need to have practiced it. But about 10 days ago is when we started for Purdue. We treated it like a bye week. And about 10 days ago, we started working with scout teams. We had the speakers blaring behind the huddle with the Purdue fight song and the crowd noise to get ready for that. And it's been, it's about 10-day prep for this game.
I'm going to make a statement, Coach, and I want you to tell me if you agree or disagree, okay?
Yep.
We know about the Power Fives. We know about how much talent there is at the SEC or the Big Ten level, probably throughout the leagues. But in terms of parity and evaluating rosters from top of league to, bottom of league, if we want to use that term, I think the MAC has as much competitive balance as any league in college football. Your thoughts?
You're 100% right. And that's why I love coaching. And I coached in the MAC at Northern Illinois. And it is from top to bottom when you look at what the staff pool is to pay your coaches, what the scholarship budget is, with the operational budget. In the MAC, from top to bottom, it's pretty dang close. I'm not going to say the school names because we all know who they are, but you look at the Big Ten and you look at the top 3 schools, what they're spending, and you compare that to the bottom 3 schools, what they're spending, it's like 2 different conferences. And that's why I love the MAC, because you have a shot as a coach to compete and outwork and out-recruit and out-develop your players, where, there's some schools in the country that are in leagues that their institutions aren't supporting them to the level that the top teams in that league are. And it's a big difference.
Mike Uremovich is our guest. He is the first-year head coach of the Ball State Cardinals. Of course, coached at Butler, coached at St. Francis of Illinois, been in a little bit of everywhere, Northern Illinois as well. Predominantly you have stayed throughout the Midwest, but you spent some time at NC State and Temple. Do you, as a coach, kind of take a little bit of what you see from all of those other places and then kind of turn it into, if you will, like this potpourri of stuff you've learned along the way of different things that work in different leagues?
For sure. Offensively, I've learned, I continue to learn, and as a coach, you're going to continue to learn. As a head coach, I think there's 2 things. I've been fortunate to work for some very good head coaches and learned a lot of things, and a lot of things that I still do right now. And also saw a few things that, hey man, I would never do it that way, so you're always trying to learn. But I do think when you get to a school, you have your base principles that you believe in and how you're going to do stuff. But in terms of recruiting and how you're running your program, it has to be a little bit geared towards what that institution has to offer and how they're supporting you, because, how you're going to recruit and develop and coach at Ball State's different than NC State. It's going to be different than Temple. It's going to be different than Butler. So you do have to fit it to the institution, but there's certain core things that are always going to be there.
Tell me the team in your coaching tenure, Coach, as a head coach, the team, the season that you look back on and the group, and there's a reason I'm asking this, the group you were most proud of was what year, what school?
You're going to laugh, but my second year at the University of St. Francis as a head coach, we took over a program that wasn't very good. And my first year, we lost our last 8 games. And my second year, we lost our first 8. So we had lost 16 games in a row. And that's before the portal. So we had a bunch of freshmen and sophomores playing for us, and those guys kept playing and playing and playing, and we won a couple games late in the year. and that built us with some confidence, and they saw some reward for their work. And then 2 years later, we ended up going 7-4 with those group of seniors. And for those guys to continue to prepare, losing week after week after week, that's hard. And I've been proud of every team I've coached, but that group right there set the foundation for the success we had at St. Francis, and it was tough.
Now, here's the thing. I don't laugh, and I'll tell you why. I asked it because one of the things that I've noticed about coaches, and in particular good and great coaches, is that oftentimes they find success and foundation in places the rest of us don't. And they look at it and they say, the easy answer here is going to be in 2011 when I was 10-3, or the easy answer is going to be in 24 at Butler when I was 9-3. But oftentimes success is found deeper within the stuff that we don't see and that we don't grasp. And
you're right.
You know
right.
what I mean?
I mean, we've won game. And
there's a lesson in all that, isn't there?
Yes. And that's why we all got into this, was to teach kids how to learn life skills to be able to go attack the rest of their life. And yeah, I want to win, man. And winning's important. And if you don't win it as a coach, they're going to fire you. We all understand that. But we're trying to develop these kids for something bigger than football. You know, and we've won games, and I've been not very happy on Sunday when I watched that film, because we didn't play to our ability level. And we've lost games, and I've came in on Sunday and been proud as heck of our group, because we played to the best of our ability. We didn't beat ourselves. We lost to somebody better, and that's going to happen sometimes.
I love it. I love it, man. It makes me right there. That just that part of it is what it's all about, Coach. And we're going to see it on display in Ross-Ade against Purdue for the Ball State Cardinals. That is this Saturday at noon. The first chance to see them in Muncie takes place on September 13th against New Hampshire. That is a 2 o'clock start, that game on ESPN+. But two of them on the road to open up, Purdue and Auburn. Coach, look forward to talking to you again. Certainly wish you the best of luck, and we'll be watching on Saturday against the Boilers.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right, Mike Uremovich, the head coach of the Ball State Cardinals. Good stuff there. Love it. Lot of stuff to talk about with the Colts. Matt Taylor going to join us at 2 o'clock, and I'm going to recap and revisit a big story about the Colts that came out before we got on the air today. And it leads to a dichotomy in terms of the way that we take it all in. I'll explain next. Earlier this morning, and I'm sure most of you by now have seen this, but the Washington Post came out with their story about the last few years in the life of Jim Irsay. And as I was reading the story, and I recapped earlier some of the things that were said in it, but as I was reading that story, and it was talking about the fact that Jim Irsay, after he in the last 2 years of his life overdosed on opiates 3 times, and that there were people close to him that had great concern about Jim Irsay's health, and we are well aware of and discussed in December of 23, I believe it was, the 911 call at his home. And shortly after that, I called 2 other people within the local media because someone who I think would know called me and said, listen, Jim Irsay had another overdose in Miami, or near Miami, I think they said, and was ultimately flown back to Indianapolis under, like, in a hospital ambulance or an air ambulance or whatever you call that, so to speak. And that he was hospitalized in an Indianapolis hospital under a special wing and et cetera. And I say that not because, like, hey, we knew about this. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is it became a very delicate area, and it became kind of like, slippery because, number one, verifying those things in the moment is very difficult via HIPAA. And number two, verifying those things also becomes questionable as to whether or not it is legitimate or needed or necessary. And the reason I say that is because this article from the Washington Post, which details in great detail, speaking to people apparently very close to Jim Irsay, about the multiple overdoses that he had, and then in addition to that, the fact that he not only was continuing to take opioid pills throughout his addiction, but also was taking, and I hope I'm saying it correctly, ketamine injections, which is a prescribed but very potent opiate. And when this article came out, it leads to the question of how much do we really need to know? And there are times I would like to think that the reason that I have this job is that it means that someone trusts that I understand the barriers or the boundaries of speaking about things. But there are times where I don't know that I even trust myself, because you want to be respectful and sensitive of the fact that, yes, Jim Irsay was an owner of an NFL team, but Jim Irsay also was a grandfather, a father, a neighbor, all of those things. And when you come to, and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about what comes with a public persona, how much of that lends to the necessity of one's life being public in totality. And I go back and forth on this because I thought to myself, his public persona lends itself towards making his personal life public because he was the owner of a franchise whose value increased exponentially thanks to a very kind deal on behalf of the Capital Improvement Board of the taxpayers of Marion County, Indianapolis, Indiana, and a publicly subsidized building that his team played in that afforded him money off of events that aren't even related to the Indianapolis Colts for the length of the contract that was agreed upon. So if the taxpayers of Indianapolis are looking at Jim Irsay and saying, we're giving you what reportedly has been 40% of every non-football generated dollar within Lucas Oil Stadium for multiple decades of moving into that stadium. In other words, the Taylor Swift concert, the concession sales, the parking on site, and the ticket sales, a percentage of that goes to Jim Irsay and the Indianapolis Colts during his lifetime. And so, therefore, does that mean that his life is up for public scrutiny? Perhaps that doesn't mean that, but it does mean that the people that are giving that money probably expect that that means that all of the business decisions of the franchise itself are being made under the clarity of thought of somebody who is operating with the proper intention of getting return on investment for the city in terms of its enjoyment, its competitiveness, and etc. And all of those things are very fair. And in addition to that, to go back and analyze and scrutinize the way that the Colts did or did not handle reports or questions or allegations as to the demons that were gripping Jim Irsay, does that lead to precedent then of how much they can be trusted moving forward to be transparent about different things in terms of relationship between the franchise and the city? Those are all fair questions. And I battled and dealt with my own trust of how to address that situation on this show with this news coming out. And what I opted to go with for the best course of action is this. In the television show Ted Lasso, which is a fantastic show, there is a scene where one of the coaches for the soccer team is explaining and answering a question about a player having a disciplinary action in the course of a game where he goes into the stands and has this volatile eruption. It was like the brawl at the Malice at the Palace type stuff. And when he's explaining it, he says, look, I get the fact that fans think that because they buy a ticket, that gives them the right to say whatever they want to athletes. I get that. But not only are they athletes, behind closed doors and in their private life, they're also people that have the same challenges, the same emotional issues as the rest of us. And in the case of Jim Irsay, yes, he is somebody that put himself out there publicly. Yes, he is somebody that capitalized financially publicly. Yes, he is somebody that put himself on the public stage, not just as a football owner, but also as a musician and an eclectic musical collector and etc. And he put himself on that stage. But he also later in his life put himself on that stage by making everyone aware of the fact that he knew he had demons. And while he did not perhaps speak to that with the level of transparency that was the validity of what he was undergoing in terms of its totality, he was transparent about it. And I think the legacy of Jim Irsay, who was a philanthropic individual that left an imprint on this town in terms of the football team and the trivia giveaways and everything that he did, I came to the epiphany or the realization of it that perhaps we needed to know from this story of the Washington Post what it was that Jim Irsay was going through, not in an we gotcha, not in a see we told you so kind of way, but rather to say that even somebody who has the means, the resources, and the financial accessibility to overcome and fight through and put in the past the grip of addiction, sadly and tragically could not do so. But he begged of all of us to not turn our back on the perceptions that come with not only the addiction, whether it be gambling, alcohol, opiates, whatever it may be, but also the stigmas of mental illness. And so this story from the Washington Post perhaps was important because what it showed is that those demons and those addictions know no boundary. And if you think that it is a weakness on your behalf because you put yourself in a plot in life that forbids you from overcoming those things, Jim Irsay reminds us that sometimes those things grip so tightly that it doesn't matter the status. and it affects everyone, and there's not a shame in it. And so, therefore, this story to me serves simply as the reminder that addiction knows no bias, and it does not in any way, shape, or form discriminate nor selectively who it grips. And so, therefore, if someone close to you is suffering from either addiction or a mental illness, this is a reminder that it is an ongoing journey and battle, and you simply have to take it one game at a time. And while that story was uncomfortable, perhaps the lesson that we can learn from all of it should give us a comfort in the fact that it is another example of how we all do at times share in the same plot moving forward from one day to the next. Matt Taylor's the voice of the Colts. They have a game upcoming against the Miami Dolphins a week from Sunday. We'll preview and get his thoughts on the finality of the roster next. Matt Taylor, voice of the Colts, set to join us here coming up just a couple of minutes from now. Been a busy day here today. Busy day. And by the way, the other one that's hard to explain with Tom Noie, when I was talking about whether or not Notre Dame is a local team, and somebody's like, Jake, you're way off base. Notre Dame has a ton of fans here. I don't disagree with any of that. What I'm saying is, unlike Indiana or Purdue or Butler, the percentage of Notre Dame people that are fans of Notre Dame are not epicentered in Indianapolis. Notre Dame is a national brand that happens to be located in Indiana. You know what I mean? So in that regard, it's a little bit different in terms of Notre Dame. The Colts announced their captains for this season. They are, and this is voted on by the players. The captains for the Colts this year: DeForest Buckner, Kenny Moore, Zaire Franklin, Quentin Nelson, and Daniel Jones. There are 3, Eddie Garrison, players that were captains last year that were not voted as captains this year. Would you like to guess those 3?
Sorry, I was texting Matt. What's the question again? I'm sorry.
3 players that were captains for the Indianapolis Colts a year ago that are not captains this year.
That would be Anthony Richardson, number 1.
That is number 1.
Number 2, who would have been a captain a year ago? I don't know. I can't remember the other 2.
All 3 on the offensive side of the ball.
Offensive? Oh, Ryan Kelly.
Nope.
Kelly wasn't a captain last year?
He might have been. I'm sorry. Of those on the roster this year, there are 3 that put their jersey on, and notice there's no C on it this year.
Oh. Jonathan Taylor, did he have the C?
That is 1. You have 1 left.
And it was an offensive player?
Yes. And I think defines captain because he played through injury.
Michael Pittman Jr.?
Yes. Those are the 3. I think at the very least what you see is that an NFL team is going to elect its starting quarterback a captain regardless, right? Because it was Richardson a year ago, and now this year they're like, oh, Daniel Jones starter, captain.
Well, I mean, there's that, and there's the other aspect too. Like you hear some of the things that Josh Downs, Michael Pittman Jr., and Adonai Mitchell say in regards to how Daniel has been in full command of the offense in the huddle. He's demanding. He's telling guys where they need to be. He's one of the first people in there every day. He's one of the last to leave. All the cliches about an NFL quarterback, he has been that.
Right. No, you're right. And again, we talked to Booger McFarland off the top of the show. That is available, by the way, in podcast form at 1075thefan.com. We ask that you wait until after J&B's show to listen to the podcast. But Booger McFarland was saying that he thinks that Daniel Jones is the kind of quarterback that if he doesn't turn the ball over, that he thinks the rest of the roster has some talent and can carry them a little bit. And we'll see whether or not that is the case. Joining us now on the always busy, as evidenced today, and available for your company to sponsor guest line, Matt Taylor is the voice of the Indianapolis Colts, joins us. Matt, let's begin with the roster itself and the, not just kind of some of the changes they had to make on the roster, but also those that went onto the practice squad that maybe at some point will get elevated over the course of the season. Was there anybody either that did make the roster or that didn't make the roster that jumped out or surprised you?
Yeah, it's a good question. No, which might be a little bit of a hot take because, I thought at receiver was pretty chalk. The 6 guys that we thought would make the team going into training camp made the team. Same thing on the defense too. There wasn't a whole lot of guys that made it that I thought wouldn't, and vice versa. Maybe the closest one, just because of your thoughts going into training camp versus, what transpired during July and August in the preseason. How about a name like the defensive tackle for the Colts, Johnson? He was with the Colts. He got drafted in 2022 and then was plucked away, got picked up by New England. And then Eric Johnson comes back with the Colts. And you're thinking, okay, well, how is this going to go? Where does he fit in? And what's the depth behind the defensive tackles that are just absolute studs for the Colts and Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner? The Colts bring in Neville Gallimore. They drafted a player at that position in the draft on day 3, but it's a big one because it's, Tim Smith from Alabama. The fact that he was kind of outside the picture to begin training camp, but then once camp started, he looks like a fish in water inside this Louis Uremovich defense, and then he's balling out in the preseason. He's the Colts' leading tackler in the preseason. So he just had a really nice camp, and based on the evidence, it was just really hard to keep him off the roster. So they pick him and Tim Smith initially, and then because they're kind of thin at linebacker, they off of waivers pick up Chad Muma to give him some depth at linebacker and to play special teams. And then it was kind of a numbers game. Keeping six defensive tackles is kind of definitely a luxury. So they decide to pick or keep Eric Johnson and waive Tim Smith. So kind of a cool story in that regard. But no, I think to answer your question, it was pretty much the roster I thought it was going to be, especially after that second preseason game against the Green Bay Packers. It went pretty much how I thought it would.
When a team decides to run against the Colts, or for that matter, I guess from a passing standpoint, sacks, but if there's a tackle made in the interior for the Colts, the odds are pretty high, Matt Taylor, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, but you might have, as the play-by-play voice of the Colts, there might be the biggest collection of tricky names for you to call, right? Is that right?
It's definitely getting more and more difficult. The Colts have their fair share of tricky names. Adetomo Adebawore and JT Tuamoloau. In the past, Bobby Okereke. Trying to think who else. Quiddy Pace pretty standard, but he's got
Dio just became Dio for that purpose, right?
Yeah, that's cool. Dio Adengbo. Yep, good recall there. But we played the Ravens in week 2 of the preseason, or week 1, I should say, and they've got some doozies too. And I think you and I have talked about this before. Like the game has just become more and more international.
Totally, yeah.
And
it's a cool thing for sure, right?
It is, but you got to be on your P's and Q's. That phonetics pronunciation chart is definitely part of your weekly preparation. And my move is to print out the depth chart. And most of the time, people don't care about this, but most of the time, in a press release, a team's press release, the depth chart is on a different page than the pronunciation guide. And so what I'll physically do is I will arts and crafts it. I'll cut it out. I'll print it out, the pronunciation guide, and I will slap it, tape it onto the depth chart and put it in like a little laminate covering. And I'll have that all week long. So wherever I go, I've got the depth chart plus the pronunciation guide on it too, so that when I'm memorizing names and numbers, I'm also at the same time memorizing pronunciation, because the game has become so much more global and international. And it seems like every year it just grows exponentially in that regard.
Matt, have you ever thought about listen, I can't imagine. There's a guy for IndyCar when we're on the West Coast. One of the guys that we use that helps out with us on West Coast races is Dan Rusanowski, who is the voice of the San Jose Sharks. Can you imagine doing hockey play-by-play? Not only would it be a challenge in following the puck, but some of those names, good Lord, man.
And you got to go with nicknames too at some time, just because you got to get the syllables and the pronunciations out quicker to keep up with the action on the ice. And it's kind of the same way with football too. So you don't hear that as much in football, just because, I don't know, I'm not a big nickname guy. So you really do have to, especially if they play for the other team, you're not going to know what they call, a backup linebacker that makes a play on special teams that has an international name about them. So you really do have to focus in on the phonetics, and I don't bat 1,000 in that regard, but I try my best, because that's your job. You owe it to these guys to, say their name right, because of all the time and the work and sweat they put in to make it to the NFL.
Matt, I think we talk so much about the quarterback. Matt Taylor is our guest here, the voice of the Colts. We've talked so much about the quarterback that I think at times and I'm not saying you, but we've neglected to really look and take a deep dive at some of the other positions for the Colts. Which position, and I don't even mean necessarily that you're saying it's the most top-heavy in terms of talent, but which position room for the Colts do you think has the most interchangeable depth where if you go 3, 4, 5 deep, you're not dropping a whole lot off from where you were at the starter?
Good one. I still think you're really strong and deep at wide receiver, and Shane talked about this the other day, that you've got really good depth at the different types of receivers that you need to have to be successful on offense. You know what I mean? You got the big, tall, power forward types and, Michael Pittman Jr. and maybe to a lesser degree Adonai Mitchell. You've got the smaller types in Josh Downs, and then you've got Coleman Owen on the practice squad too, who, by the way, if I could just go on a tangent, Coleman Owen just kicked total butt during the preseason. I was so happy to see him stick around because I think he's got a bright future. He just has the it factor about him coming out of Ohio as an undrafted free agent. And then got Anthony Gould in that regard too. Alec Pierce is a bigger body receiver, but he's got speed. He's got the ball skills. So I think you're really, really set and deep there at wide receiver. And you talked about interchangeable parts. That's kind of what I'm going for in terms of, guys' body types and skill sets. They can do a lot of different things. And then I still think cornerback too in the secondary. Going into training camp, we thought they'd keep 6 and it would be a strength of the team. And even though it's different personnel, they still keep 6. And it's still a strength of the team, even though the names are a little bit different than we thought they would be like a month ago. And I think the Colts aren't messing around there. Like, they understand completely that under Lou Anarumo, in order to have success on defense in that style of scheme, they got to have playmakers and experience, high football IQ guys and savvy players in the back end. Otherwise, it just probably won't work, right? So when Jalen Jones, I'm saying, they go bold and they bring in Xavier Howard, like somebody that they're really familiar with, that Lou Anarumo knows really well, and that has succeeded in this style of defense, 4-time Pro Bowler, ball hawk, and, interception leader, all of those things. Like, they're not messing around. So it just tells me that they have completely kind of shifted the type of cornerback that they want now on defense. It was kind of longer, big body types, and now with Lou, he wants the shiftier guys and just a focus on speed. You got to have speed, and the bottom line is you have to get your hands on the football in this defense. Otherwise, I just don't think it's going to work. They have to have playmakers that get their hands on the ball with passes defensed, interceptions, takeaways, and when you look at the names on this defense now in the secondary, Ward, Howard, Bynum, Kenny Moore, like those 4 guys have combined for like over 340 starts, over 250 passes defensed, and almost 70 career interceptions. Like, they've got a really experienced secondary on paper. So now you just got to go out and play, and hopefully that it translates into big impact affecting the other team's quarterback, which they didn't do collectively on defense as much as they needed to last year.
Matt, one of the things I like about this roster is more than your fair share of mullets. I think a football team needs mullets, right?
Well, Tyler Warren has a little bit of. He's in the mullet category.
I'm looking here. And
he's in the neighborhood. He's in the neighborhood of a mullet, right?
Yeah, I'm going off of like the preseason photos, which might actually be dangerous, right? I mean, several guys might have decided to, clean up the act, if you will. There's a couple on the line here. Who's the lineman I saw that has like I'm talking. Oh, here we go. And help me on the pronunciation of the last name. Luke, out of Virginia Tech.
Tenuta.
Luke Tenuta. Okay, yeah.
Sweet mullet.
Yeah, I think he might have. I could be wrong, but I think he might have cleaned that up.
Did he hit great clips? Okay.
Yeah, great clips might have been involved in it.
Okay, hold on. There was I think Bortolini. Does Bortolini have a mullet?
Yeah, Bortolini's got the. He's got like what the. oh God, you're gonna kill me for this. He's got like the Anthony Leal look. You know what I'm saying? Like where it's like kind of tight on the sides and longer on top. I don't know what you call that, but it's kind of a young man's game for sure.
And then lots of beards. I noticed that too. Lots of beards. Are you going to grow a beard out?
Oh, Jake, it would take me about 40 years to grow a beard.
Really?
It would come in pat. Yeah, I maybe a little bit of a too much information on Matt Taylor, but not a whole lot of hair going on. Yeah,
Okay.
like maybe one or two chest hairs.
Okay. So in other words, if the Colts happen to have a game at Gillette Stadium, you're not taking the free handouts. Is what you're getting at? You don't need them?
No, yeah, no. I mean, luckily for me, I average about 2 shaves a week, and I know other people average about 2 shaves a day. So
You're lucky in that regard. Trust me.
I know.
The Colts will get set against the Miami Dolphins. Matt, in the time that you have done this, in the NBA, I have always felt that it takes you about 20 to 25 games to truly know what team you have and how and where you are, so to speak.
Yep.
In the NFL, that would translate to 4 games, a quarter of the season. But the NFL is a little bit different because of the attrition that takes place in terms of injuries and other such things. But realistically, if you look at the way they open up, you got Miami, you got Denver, and then you go Tennessee and the Rams. Will we have a pretty good idea who they are after those 4?
Yeah, I'm really glad you bring this up because I think you're spot on because of how different now the rules are in the NFL, and you got to play by the collective bargaining agreement. And the first couple of days, maybe the first week or so of camp is in pro pads, and the full pads don't come on, and teams don't live tackle, full tackle to the ground anymore. So it's such a good point. And to me, it really was driven home in 2022. And the reason why I say that is in 2022, here comes Matt Ryan, and the Colts looked awesome in training camp. Like I thought based on what I saw, and that year they stayed relatively healthy and injury-free in training camp, right? There was a lot of, full participation, and Matt Ryan was throwing the ball all over the place. They looked good in the preseason and thought, all right, here we go. This is first AFC South championship since 2014, and the Colts are going to win 10 games. And then, we all know what that season was. Here comes Jeff Saturday, and Frank Reich was fired, and, the Sam Ellinger thing, and here comes Nick Foles. Like, it was just a nightmare, right? And so, that's why I'm out of the prediction game, because I think not that training camp – I'm not saying at all that training camp and the preseason don't matter, because they do. They're necessary evils. They're part of the process. But you're just not going to know fully, especially with a new quarterback that the Colts have had to use every year, because Daniel Jones will be the 11th different starting quarterback the Colts have used since 2019. You're not really going to know. It's almost like in some cases, based on the team and your circumstances, it's almost like the first month of the season is like an extended feeling out process of training camp, trying to find out who you are, who you're not, what you can do, and how to best use personnel. So yeah, I'm out of the prediction game totally because of just, you never really know what you got until you start playing regular season games. And I mean, think of it like this. I mean, for every player in the NFL, it doesn't matter if you've been in the league 9 years or if you're a rookie, this is going to be your first chance. A week from Sunday will be your first chance in over 9 months to play a flat out, full out 4 quarters of football and play 60 to 70 snaps in one afternoon. You just haven't done it in almost a year. And so you just don't know. You can think you have a good idea of like what your strengths and weaknesses are and things like that. But, as Rick Venturi always likes to say, like opening day in the first week or 2 of the season, it's like Christmas and Halloween because you're excited to see, what all your toys look like and get them all out and see what they can do. But at the same time, it's Halloween because if it doesn't go well, you could be in for a nightmare.
By the way, for Halloween, when you were a kid, Matt Taylor, when you were trick-or-treating, did you go with the plastic pumpkin or were you a pillowcase guy?
Well, the later years, definitely a pillowcase because it gave you more space, some more flexibility. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that Jerry Seinfeld bit. I don't know if you've ever seen that. You know, you get in the later years, you're going through the motions. You know, you ring the doorbell, you're like, bing bong, and they're like, oh, what are you supposed to be? It's like, I'm supposed to be done by now, all right? We hit the
No,
door.
I'm just
We
dressed
hit
as
the
a
door.
teenager.
You hit the bag.
So
That's right.
Here's the thing I always thought was weird when it came to trick-or-treating, Matt, and rest assured, we'll probably revisit this conversation in October. But the last year or two that you trick-or-treated, you felt the societal pressure to act like you were supposed to not care anymore, but deep down you never wanted to stop doing it. Do you agree with that?
Oh, God, yeah. 100%. No, I mean, I think I tried to relay that to the friends too. Like, you know, hey guys, like, you know, we're going into 8th grade or whatever it was, like 7th, 8th grade.
I think that's about right. That's about the time period, right?
Yeah, I don't think you do it in high school. Like you know, when you get your learner's permit, you probably shouldn't be trick or treating anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, now people get their learner's permit at the age of like 24. Have you noticed that?
That's right.
It's a weird thing too, right?
Things are a little bit different there. But yeah, I mean, I think I knew in the back of my mind, like, hey, you know, stop and kind of appreciate this. And I've always had just like this weird ability to like sort of like stop and understand like the presence of where you are and stuff. You know what I mean?
You also were the only 5th grader in like whatever year. What year would you have been in 5th grade, Matt?
Like 1994.
Okay,
5.
so you were the only 5th grader in 1994 that actually was completely content with a 4 and a 45. You know what I mean? Like
100%.
Somebody's handing out REO Speedwagon tapes, and they're like, "Ah, cool, let's go back to that house." You know?
Yeah, let's go back to the guy giving out fog hat 45.
Hey, let's end with this. With Daniel Jones at quarterback now, and we've talked plenty about that decision. But in terms of the scheme of what Shane Steichen offensively may be able to do with Daniel Jones that he did or did not do with Anthony Richardson, the style that we're going to see or the players that may most benefit from Daniel Jones there, they will stylistically look different offensively in what way?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. You know, stylistically, I think one of the reasons, not the main reason, I mean, I think Chris and Shane will be able to give you a better answer, but just my gut feeling on the matter is one of the reasons why they wanted to pursue Daniel Jones as an option in free agency is because aesthetically, the offense doesn't have to change between he and Anthony Richardson, no matter who won that job when the quarterback battle started back in April. And that's important for the rest of the guys on offense. They don't have to kind of change and flip-flop mindset. I mean, it's not like going from Anthony Richardson to Joe Flacco. I mean, one guy, no hyperbole, is the most athletic quarterback in the history of the game versus another one who's got, you know, pretty much at this point in his career, a very, very limited ability to be mobile in the pocket. So you don't have to change everything up for everybody else on the roster, which is important. And certainly I don't think you're going to see as many design runs for Daniel Jones throughout the course of a game as you would for Anthony Richardson, but I still think you're going to see some, and I still think it's important for him to have the threat of, you know, pulling a read zone or a read option and running off tackle and reading that defensive end to keep the defense honest, because I think that has to be part of, you know, your playbook and part of your weekly routine to keep the defense honest. And then secondly, you know, somebody asked me earlier, hey, is this going to be, all right, is Daniel Jones now the quarterback? Is this going to be like Gardner Minshew 2023? And no, I don't think it will be at all, because Gardner, he was really accurate and efficient. But a lot of times with Gardner, you know, kind of the knock on that was it was like playing on a 15 to 20-yard field. You know what I mean? Like, if the defense could stack the box and load up to stop the running game and Jonathan Taylor, the Colts had a hard time of winning downfield and outside the numbers. With Daniel Jones, he's still going to be able to push the ball, and they're emphasizing that. It's hard to – I mean, you've got to have that inside your offense. It's hard to go on 10, 12-play scoring drives. There's a lot of things that can foobar a drive, right? I mean, you could have a pre-snap penalty. You could have a sack that takes you out of, down a distance favorably. There's just a lot of things that can derail a methodical drive. In the NFL, man, I think there's two things that statistically, you know, go play a long go a long way in deciding who wins games. First one is turnovers, right? Who wins the turnover battle. And the second one is more often than not the team that has more big plays than the other wins the game. And so the Colts know that. They need to generate just as many big plays with Daniel Jones as they would have with Anthony Richardson, and he can do it, and that's where Pierce comes into play. It's where Adonai Mitchell comes into play, and certainly they have to feast in the middle of the field more often this year than they did last year with Tyler Warren and the rest of those tight ends. And I think just with his overall body of work and, career accuracy, that Daniel Jones is going to be able to do those things, be consistent, be efficient on offense, but also tap into those chunk plays that you have to have that helps mitigate scoring and makes the offense hum and become more efficient.
All right, last question. It's the most important of all. 1993, third grade Matt Taylor's trick-or-treating, gets to a house, rings the doorbell. Guy answers the door and says, listen, I got no candy left. I apologize. You're late to the party. I got no candy. But what I do have is I have inside of my garage here, in still the plastic casing of it, the helmet of every opponent of the Colts 2025 schedule. The Miami Dolphins, the Denver Broncos, the Tennessee Titans, the Rams, the Raiders, the Arizona Cardinals, the Chargers, the Steelers, the Falcons, the Chiefs, the Seahawks, the Texans. Obviously, you wouldn't know what the Texans are, but bear with me, suspend reality here. You get to pick one of them as little kid Matt Taylor simply because you think it would be the coolest one to sit on your bookshelf in your bedroom because you can't deny that it's just one badass helmet. You go with who?
Well, first of all, you want me to go in a stranger's house when I'm 9 years old?
Your parents are with you. You're being chaperoned.
Oh, my dad's with me. All right, good. Does my dad know the guy?
Yeah, your dad knows the guy. It's Eddie White, actually, and these are all from back when he worked at Logo 7. And then he tells you about Dan Marino for 20 minutes, and then you get to leave.
I'd like to listen to those stories. Yeah, I'm probably. I've always been really, really. I've always been really drawn to the Kansas City Chiefs logo and their color scheme because my favorite color growing up was red because of the Cincinnati Reds. My favorite player was Ray Larkin. So as a 9-year-old, I probably would have been drawn to the red uniform. I like the simplicity of the logo. And two, I'm a big color contrast uniform guy. I like one color on top and a different color on the bottom when you wear the football pants. That's why I would love to see, and I don't know when and for how long they did this, Jake, you would know, but when the Colts used to wear blue pants on the road instead of the white.
Correct.
I'm a big color contrast guy. So the Chiefs, when they're at home, they wear red on top, white on bottom, and then I think reverse it on the road. So I'm a big proponent of that, so I would probably go the Kansas City Chiefs for that reason.
Eddie, who would you pick?
I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry.
Matt, that's the most shocking part of the interview, is it not?
Yep. Yeah, that's how intriguing we were just then, Jake.
Not to mention, it's a moot point for Eddie because they don't make Riddell helmets at a 9 3/8, so it doesn't matter, right? Matt, appreciate the time as always.
All right, guys. Be well. Have a good Labor Day weekend.
You too. Matt Taylor, the voice of the Colts. By the way, reminder on that, we will not be on the air on Monday. We will all be getting the Labor Day holiday off. Eddie, the question was this.
San Francisco 49ers.
Do they play? Oh, they do play San Francisco. Okay, fair enough. That's your answer?
Mm-hmm.
You know my answer, right?
Seattle Seahawks?
Yes. Especially if it's one of those old school ones, man. The silver Seahawks helmets, legit. Totally legit. Love everything about it. We need to get to an update on one of the most prominent athletes in the state. I'll explain next. Had a busy show today. Talked about the Jim Irsay story from the Washington Post. Talked with Tom Noie from the South Bend Tribune. Booger McFarland earlier talking a little college football in the NFL. Mike Uremovich, the new head coach at Ball State, joining us. They open up against Purdue coming up Saturday. Wyoming in action tonight. Myself and Wyoming Roy that listens to the program, probably the only two that are aware that Wyoming opens up tonight, but they do. The Indiana Fever we have not gotten to, and we typically do talk about the Fever pretty extensively. They are next in action, I believe, tomorrow night in Los Angeles. Correct, Eddie?
10 o'clock, a late one.
You doing the pre- and post game for that?
I am, 9:45 right here on the Fan.
To bring in some Java House coffee for you. Keep you up late,
You
right?
know, I wouldn't mind.
The Wrangler energy they have? Give you some of that?
I mean, I've never tried the Java House coffee, but, I mean, you and Ed Carpenter rave about it, so it must be good.
I have
Especially if a guy named Ed is talking about it in that high regard.
I don't even like coffee, and yet I find myself drinking it. But Caitlin Clark, I thought it was really interesting when we had on Stephanie White, and she said that before they can get Caitlin Clark back in games and on the floor, that she would like to see Caitlin Clark have 5 full practices. And they really haven't had any opportunity for full practices. As a matter of fact, when she mentioned it, Stephanie White then said, you know, the reality is that we have only had walkthroughs. And she was very clear in saying, no, I need full practices to see just from the endurance standpoint and the conditioning standpoint.
She elaborated more on that Tuesday night in her pregame media availability, Jake. I believe Tony East asked her about it. And she said, well, we're not going to get many full practices in, but we can still, you know, put her out there and, you know, whether it's 2v2s, 3v3s, 4v4s, those kinds of situations.
2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-4, right?
Yes. Those kind of situations to see how she's responding and handling things and moving around. But she did say she hasn't gone through one of those yet.
They're kind of running out of time, though, aren't they? I mean, I hate to say it that way, but.
Yeah, 6 games left. And they flew out to L.A. today.
And the Sparks, you know, L.A., I mean, that would seem to be another opportunity for the Fever to get a win, to go 3 games over 500 if they were to get it. Kelsey Mitchell continues to play at a very high level. And I think when you look at their just the overall attrition under which they've had, you know, to deal with everything, it's really pretty impressive. I'm not here to carry their water, but they've had to really adjust on the fly a lot, and Kelsey Mitchell gets a ton of credit here.
Her and Aaliyah Boston both, Jake, for the better part of the year, those two have been incredibly steady and the same player almost every single night. You know, we're going to get Kelsey Mitchell walks into the gym and she's going to give you 20. Aaliyah Boston's going to walk into the gym. She'll give you somewhere around, 14 points, 8 boards, a couple of assists, a block, and a steal. It's just finding the production outside of those two that's been the biggest problem.
ESPN, by the way, has done their annual survey of the top 100 players in the National Football League.
Oh, really?
There were 2. I went back, I kid you not. I looked over and over and over because I thought to myself, I have to be skipping over one of the names here. Because there was a Colt that I thought for certain would be on that list. And I sat there and looked over it and over it and over it, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I didn't see them.
They didn't put Jonathan Taylor on the list?
He was on there.
Okay. Quentin Nelson?
He was on there.
Ooh.
There is a third that typically is on that list. I'm certain.
DeForest Buckner.
Yes. And he was not, I didn't see him on there.
Fascinating.
I think DeForest Buckner, like 2 years ago, was their highest ranked player. Jonathan Taylor, I believe, was 61, and Quentin Nelson was 68. You want to guess the top 2, Eddie?
I'm going to go number 1 was Josh Allen. Am I right?
Your number 2?
Lamar Jackson.
Okay. Is that what you're sticking with?
I mean, they should be 1 and 2 in some regard, either flip flopped. I could see Myles Garrett being one up there, or T.J. Watt.
Myles Garrett was very high on the list. Very high on the list.
But I'm going to stick with the two quarterbacks of Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen being 1 and 2 in some way, shape, or form.
You're partially correct.
So that means one of them's number 2 or number 1, and the other one's not.
Stew on it for a second.
Okay.
I will let you know, and we will hand it off to John as part of our Love Heating and Air, love-hvac.com, 317-353-2141 crossover chat next. Okay, Eddie. The ESPN Top 100 college football players listing. I only mention this because DeForest Buckner, I double-checked it, tripled.
Now, is this from last year or is this for the upcoming season?
This is for the upcoming season.
Oh, I misunderstood. I was talking about last year.
Top 100 players in the NFL.
Okay, can I change my answer then?
Okay.
I will go Josh Allen.
Okay.
I will not go Lamar Jackson this time.
Okay.
I think this guy's due for a bounce back in some regard just because of how he concluded the Super Bowl playing his worst game ever, and he's on this personal vendetta mission. Badgering Mahomes.
Joe Burrow's number 5.
Ooh.
Lamar Jackson, number 4. Myles Garrett, number 3. Josh Allen, number 2. And Patrick Mahomes is number 1.
Oh, wow.
After the Chiefs lost in the Super Bowl, the league's most talented quarterback will have plenty of motivation to showcase that he can still be a better version of himself. Clearly, Eddie read this during the break.
No. I've been closing out stuff so James can get on the board for JMV show.
Mm-hmm. Not sure I believe you.
And I was playing a clip for you as well.
That clip, by the way, happened last night at the U.S. Open. I love high-level tennis. I think high-level tennis, I'm telling you, if you were to pick any sport and have the opportunity to watch it like in the best seats with the best vantage point, up close and personal, I really do think that high-level tennis is as good as anything. I think it's perhaps the most underrated spectator sport. I used to love, like, the clay courts were great. That then became the RCA Hardcourt Championships in Indianapolis, which was always the precursor to the U.S. Open. That tournament now goes to Cincinnati right before the U.S. Open, and I thought I had heard a couple of years ago that the Cincinnati one was in jeopardy, and it was going to, and maybe this has already been announced, I don't know, like, was it Savannah or Hilton Head or somewhere like that? But either way, last night in the U.S. Open, now, how much tennis do you watch?
You know, Jake, right about now I'm watching more tennis than probably I am normally. So, like, I'll watch the Australian Open, I'll watch the French Open. Pretty much I'll try to dabble on all the Grand Slams.
Yeah, fair, right? So you have upcoming a match that took place, or no, I'm sorry, the match that took place last night between Taylor Townsend of the United States defeated, and I think I'm saying this right, Yelena Ostapenko, right? And afterwards, apparently this is a budding rivalry between these two players. And Ostapenko is ranked 25th, seeded 25th, Townsend unseeded. But afterwards, she was asked about her victory and some of the rivalry between the two players. And Taylor Townsend had this to say.
Fill us in on the conversation you were having with Yelena out there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's competition. People get upset when they lose, and you can't. Some people say bad things. She told me I have no class, I have no education, and to see what happens when we get outside the U.S. So I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I beat her in Canada outside the U.S. I beat her in New York outside the U.S. So let's see what else she has to say.
Okay. Can you play that one more time?
Yeah, sure can.
With Yelena out there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's competition. People get upset when they lose, and you can't. Some people say bad things. She told me I have no class, I have no education, and to see what happens when we get outside the U.S. So I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I beat her in Canada outside the U.S. I beat her in New York outside the U.S. So let's see what else she has to say.
Apparently, when it comes to competition, apparently people say things without thinking, not just because they lose and the competitive juices are flowing, but perhaps because they won as well. No
They're
further
staying
comment
in Cincinnati, by the way. They were talking about moving to Charlotte.
Charlotte, is that where it was?
Charlotte, yes.
Okay. But staying in Cincinnati, outside the U.S., mind you. JMV is out at Sid's, by the way. My understanding is there's an anniversary or birthday celebration that's taking place. Heaven Hill Distillery is going to be with him as well, so that means Brent's going to be out there, which is always a fun show. John joining us now to preview what's upcoming on the Thursday show. I'm a little envious, John. That's a pretty cool location where we find you today.
Yeah, I dig it, too, because we get to talk it up with the Love Heating and Air crosstalk segment we have here at love-hvac.com. That is awesome. We created that because we get a little back and forth going in. And Sid's, as you mentioned, Jake, is celebrating 80 years this summer at the legendary On the Square in Noblesville location. So we thought it appropriate to have a tavern tour stop. And that's with Heaven Hill Distillery. Brent is here. The samples are flowing. And it's one hell, Jake, of a way to get the Labor Day weekend bender off to a Thursday start right here. And we're just kind of laying the groundwork, I think, initially to entice Shannon to join us for the entirety of the weekend while you're in Nashville. While you're in Nashville calling vroom vrooms.
Four-day weekend. That's right. You know, Shannon's birthday is tomorrow, John.
Yeah, well, we're inside that. We got it. I got her covered. Thank you very much.
All right, fair enough.
Happy birthday.
I guarantee you for her birthday she'll have a request for the JMV takeover. But let's begin with the big program tonight. You and Brent are going to be talking about what over the course of the next couple of hours?
Well, I think you hit it really well regarding the Washington Post article about Jim Irsay. And, you know, those were a lot of rumors and a lot of stuff floating around. I think at the end of it all, you can take it a couple of different directions, and I thought one accurately so by you. You know, it's, you know, questioning how transparent the organization is and will be. I think with personal situations like that, you're never going to get transparency. And, you know, before he'd gone through similar situations during a better era, and then he went through those situations, and then it ended tragically here back in May during a not-so-good era. So I think that also is dependent on how people view it. But, yeah, overall, you know, he tried to do a lot while also juggling the situation he was in, and it is nothing still but sad, even with that Washington Post article of this morning, for sure, Jake.
Yeah, no question about it. And so, you know, there will be probably plenty more that will be spoken and said about it. But JMV and Brett will be out there for the next couple of hours, and that is an awesome location in Noblesville, John. Super cool location.
It is. Happy birthday to Shannon Walsh.
That's right. Tomorrow.
21 years. I'm telling you what, she's absolute 21-year-old smoke, brother. Let me tell you. You know how lucky you are. You know how much you out. Like, Rigoberto Sanchez has nothing on your ass, man. Seriously. You out-kicked the coverage like crazy.
I did. You are correct. I'm very fortunate in that regard, John. Much appreciated.
Well done.
Much appreciated. All right. We'll be listening to John coming up just a little bit out there at Sid's in Noblesville. And, yes, in fact, we're going to dinner tonight, and that's going to be the birthday celebration, I guess. What's on the sports calendar for tonight, Eddie? Obviously, tomorrow night you've got the Fever game, but tonight there's some college football getting underway, is there not?
There is college football tonight, Jake. It starts at 5:30, I want to say. I got to pull the schedule back up.
I'm looking at it right here. This is that's Saturdays. Man, there's a ton of games tonight.
Yeah, so you got starting at 5:30. This is what's on tap tonight, Jake. You've got Boise State, number 25
we
at
should get
South
like
Florida.
A beer company to sponsor that.
Yeah, I know, right?
What's on tap, right?
Yeah. 5:30 tonight, Boise State, or sometimes you pronounce it Boise State, at South Florida, 5:30. That'll be on during JMV show. In terms of Big Ten action, Rutgers is hosting Ohio tonight. That is at 6 o'clock. You've got to wait a little bit. 8 o'clock on Fox Sports 1, Minnesota welcomes Buffalo. By the way, Minnesota, I believe, was a team that yesterday that
Brett Lewis said look out for him,
identified to look out. Yeah. Correct. And at 9 o'clock tonight, one of the, I think, marquee games on the schedule for tonight in terms of games. Nebraska is at Cincinnati.
Yeah, that's a decent game, man.
Yeah, that game is on ESPN tonight, 9 o'clock. And also at 9, the Red Hawks of Miami of Ohio are in. Now, do you go Wisconsin or Wisconsin? Wisconsin.
Yeah.
9 o'clock, Big Ten.
Stony Brook is taking on San Diego State, which is interesting because my understanding is Fulton and Creston were unavailable. So Stony Brook is taking on San Diego
Jake,
State.
and I am sorry. You're probably irritated with me and mad at me for not even mentioning this. The Pokes and the Zips, 7 o'clock.
Wyoming, baby. Let's go. All in on Wyoming. I got my Wyoming sweatshirt that I wear all winter long, ready to rock and roll for football season. All right, thank you to Booger McFarland for joining us earlier today. Tom Noie as well. Matt Taylor, the voice of the Colts. And also, we talked a little Ball State football, Eddie.
Mike Uremovich joined the program as well.
So that game, Ball State and Purdue, coming up on Saturday. John's up next with Brent there at Sid's in Noblesville. We'll be back with you at noon tomorrow, and I thank you for listening to Query & Company.